anybody. This is going to be a quick overview, a recap of Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. Lightbringer just came out, which is book 3 of a 4-part series starting with Iron Gold. So the original trilogy of Red Rising, Golding Sun, and Morning Star concluded quite nicely. Iron Gold picks up 10 years later and starts a new series, which will be 4 books, Lightbringer being the third of those. So at the end of Red Rising, Darrow the Reaper, Mustang, Severo, and Cassius had killed the Sovereign, overthrown the Society, and they started a new government, a republic, on Luna. They have conquered Earth, Luna, and Mars, or freed, liberated, and started a new government. They have freed all the slaves, everyone has a seat at the table, and Golds have relinquished a lot of their power. So we see a lot of meetings in this. There was a lot of Republic meetings, a lot of bickering, a lot of kind of corruption, a lot of problems with that. The book kicks off with Darrow, as leader of the army, has conquered Venus in an iron rain. That's not right. I'm sorry. They conquered Mercury. I pictured it wrong in my head. They conquered Mercury in an iron rain. Mercury and Venus are the 2 planets left to the Society. So all the gold rulers and people of the Society that you kind of hate, the Ash Lord, who burned one of the moons of Jupiter, one of the moons of Saturn, sorry. A lot of the people that have fled, the old grimaces that fled from Luna, they took place in the Society Remnant, which is the 2 planets closest in the core. And they've been fighting Darrow the last 10 years. The Rim Dominion, which is all the planets past the asteroid belt, so all the moon lords of Jupiter and Saturn, they kind of formed their own government, and because they didn't like the reach of the core anyway, they're supposed to be a little bit more honorable. They treat people with respect, even though they have slaves. So they kind of did their own thing out beyond the Rim. And so those are the 3 governments we have. We have the Rim Dominion, the Solar Republic, and the Society Remnant. So Darrow is saying, hey, I still don't trust all these people. I'm going to go and conquer Mercury. And they had a blockade around it. And the Republic voted, like, just continue the blockade. And Darrow said, I'm the general. We're going to do an iron rain. And he launched on that, and he took the planet. But heavy losses. He took a lot of casualties. He really ticked off Sephi, which is the leader of all the Obsidians, who her people pay the highest price. So throughout this book, she kind of would draw support for Darrow, and her people start kind of disappearing. She's kind of consolidating power to herself, and she kind of votes, not against Darrow, but just kind of abstains. She doesn't like her people paying the blood price of the Republic. So we kind of get leanings of all the Obsidians leaving the army and leaving the Howlers, which hurts. So Darrow disobeyed the Republic, and so they call for him to be imprisoned. They call for his arrest because he committed treason. He disobeyed a direct order and just did whatever he wanted, and that erodes the confidence of the entire Republic. And everyone was thinking like, oh, well, Darrow thinks, and it is what happens, that the Society Remnant, the Grimace, the Ash Lord, who takes the blame, has owned senators and is causing dissent, and he's trying to trap Darrow to basically throw a coup and absolve the Senate and put his own people in charge, and put himself in charge. His wife is the leader. She's the sovereign. She gave up a lot of her power with the reform. They have a son, Pax, who is awesome. So Darrow doesn't take the bait. He, instead of pulling a Caesar, marching his army in, he flees, and he takes all the Howlers, and he's like, I'm just going to end this army at the top. I'm going to cut the head off the snake, and he flies to Venus. He's going to kill the Ash Lord, so he takes like an elite troop of people. But Mustang saw it coming, so she goes to arrest him at their house because he goes back to say goodbye to their son, and it's bloody. And he kills this like really cool Obsidian who's like the leader of the guard, and so he's got blood on his hands. People are like really uproared, and he was trying to like just wound everybody. And anyway, it was a big misunderstanding. But yeah, people are dead, and so he kind of flees in shame. He raids the prison that they have on Earth, underneath the ocean, deep grave, and he frees Apollonius, the Minotaur, who was one of his great nemesis that he was fighting. Very popular, very charismatic. Wore a giant bull head and called himself the Minotaur. Actually, one of my favorite characters, even though he's insane. Might be why. So he frees him from this prison, and is using him to rally his own troops and army on on Venus. So he could use those guys to overthrow the Ash Lord, and also just like, oh, we escaped from the prison, let us on the planet. So they're using Apollonius's codes and face to basically sneak onto Venus. That works. And the next big thing, so this book isn't just about Darrow, switching from Red Rising, cat hair, which is, I know it's everywhere, all about Darrow, single character, moves very quickly. This book adds a lot of viewpoints. It adds a lot of characters. It gives a slower start, but I think it does pay off, mainly in the next book, Dark Age. But very enjoyable characters that really pay off. So I'll give you a brief overview of that, and then we'll get back to Darrow. So we are following Lysander, Loon, who is the lost ward, not lost, but the ward of the Loons, Octavia, the old sovereign, the grandson, the heir to the empire, was pardoned, given to Cassius as a ward, and they've just been chilling out through the belt, the asteroid belt, being space pirates, but good space pirates. They've been rescuing people and fighting people, and basically everyone thinks that Darrow messed up and the entire solar system is in chaos. So Cassius is kind of white knighting it out there, righting wrongs and saving babes, and also just getting super drunk in his spaceship and not doing so hot. So he's been training Lysander, which is cool. So in the Way of the Blade and the Willow Wade, and they get a distress signal, and they board the ship to try to rescue a babe. It's Seraphina, who is the daughter of the Rim Dominion. So the Raws, who are the leaders of the Outer Rim, the daughter was sent on a secret mission to find a video, to find intelligence. The intelligence being who actually caused the order of the destruction of the shipyards outside, I just can't close down this map, Ganymede. So outside Ganymede, we had all these big shipyards, and Darrow destroyed them, but he blamed it on one of the other golds. Sorry, I'm blanking on names. His friend, his buddy. I don't know if he'll have people that are killed in this. Maybe it will. Fabio. Roque Al Fabio. Okay, get out of the camera. Roque Al Fabio, he blamed it on Roque, and he blamed it on Octavia's orders. And saying like, oh no, those core goals are the worst. But he did it as a decisive move to stop the next war. If he can destroy the shipyards, he can keep the Rim Lords from marching on the core and Mars. And it worked. But there's people that suspect that it was all a trick. And they've had a alliance, with a peace, a truce for the last 10 years. Don't cross the asteroid belt. So this girl, Seraphina, crossing the asteroid belt. She met with someone, and she bought a holocube that has proof. So this is taken back to the Outer Rim, and this creates a kind of a civil war. So the leaders of the Romulus Ara, he admits it, and he commits suicide by marching out into the cold, and his honors, and he's saying, hey, I was trying to prevent a civil war, but I lied to you, and I covered it up, and he dies, and it's really sad, because he was super cool. So his wife, Dido, now rallies up all the golds of the Outer Rim to march or to align and take back the core, saying our truce was based on a lie. We were manipulated. Thousands of our people died. Our shipyards were destroyed. Our commerce, our industry, by the Reaper, who they call the Slave King, because he used to be a slave, or King of the Slaves. Anyway, so now we have the Rim coming towards the core, which Darrow had kind of foreseen, and he was kind of like, hey, I got to end this with the core because the Rim is coming, and they're super hardcore. Really admirable people, mostly. So they blame Cassius too, for one of their daughters that was butchered during Darrow's glory, his victory. Anyway, Darrow's party that got overthrown by the Jackal, and everyone there was assassinated, and Cassius had a part in that. He didn't really like murder all these women and children, but he was there and he was complicit. So they're like, we're gonna judge you in this duel, and he duels to the death the person who fights him. Super cool fight, kills the guy. It doesn't have his name. It was a Raw. It wasn't as cool. Apollonius? Nope, not him. Man. Anyway, and they're like, okay, and next. And he's like, I did my part. My honor is intact. I defended my honor. And he fights down like 30 Raws. And he just keeps getting bloodied and bloodied. So he did it until finally Lysander says, I'll give you the cube that you want. I'll give you the information. I'll unlock the safe that everything was locked in to save Cassius' life. And then Cassius died in surgery. I don't believe he did, but we don't actually know. It happened off camera, so I don't believe it. But Cassius at this point is dead from succumbing from his wounds from fighting like 30 people to the death in a row. And it was super cool. So that's kind of Lysander's plot in this. He announces that he is a loon. He is the heir in hiding, lost these last 10 years. And he says, I will go to the core. We need an alliance against Darrow and the Slave King and the Republic. All Golds must unite. He's saying Darrow's experiment didn't work. Golds are the only one that can heal everyone, that can heal this union and lead. And it's going to be me, because I have the bloodline. So let me go as an emissary, because I have connections with the core, with the old sovereign, the old society. And he does an emissary troop with the two heirs of the Raw, Seraphina and Nope. Man, what is this? Some of my name's in it. Diomedes, there it is. Diomedes is super honorable, and he refused to fight Cassius because he was a guest, and they had broken bread together, and that was against their honor. And he's saying, no, I'm not going to fight Cassius. This isn't a fair fight. And it wasn't, but Cassius did really cool anyway. That's probably the reason Cassius is still alive, because Diomedes is honorable, and also the best sword fighter of the Rim. So, that's Lysander's arc. Lots of cool space pirates, getting the alliance with the Raw, finding out the truth of what Darrow did, destroying the shipyards of Ganymede, and they're marching on, well, they're sending troops and people out to the Raws. To the Grimaces on Mercury and Venus. And that's where their arc ends. So, the other person we get is Shirley. She's in this book. Lyria. So Lyria is a red. She's on Mars. And so they get moved from the underground, from the mines, into like a temporary camp. But that's been like 2 years. So her entire family is kind of living on the surface in the swamp and this like refugee camp. Because they were liberated from the mines, they were saved, and all their jobs were replaced by robots. But it's kind of worse there. That, like we were proud before we were doing our job, and we had labor, and now we're like getting eaten by mosquitoes. And also, she is a Gamma. And if you remember in the original series, Gamma are the ones that were favored by the system. They're the ones that always got the laurel, and they were always like the favored ones to create interclan hate. So now, all the other mines hate them, and basically we have a lot of like red on red, like clan warfare, terrorism kind of stuff going on. So her refugee camp gets raided by the Red Hand, and her entire family gets slaughtered. And then the Telemonases come to end the raid and try to save people. One of those being Cavix a Telemanus, who is Pax's dad. Super cool giant guy, big red beard, has a little like fox friend. So he gets hit by like an EMP, lands in the swamp mud and is drowning. Lyria is like the only one that swims out to him, like ties a rope around him, and gets like 20 other Reds to haul him above the surface so he doesn't suffocate underwater. Saves his life, and he's like, I owe you a debt. And she's like, get me off this planet, it's the worst. And everyone I know is dead. So she joins his crew as like a steward, like a page, and she like takes care of the fox and brings him tea. And it's like, it's a paying job, it gets her off planet, but she gets approached by Ephraim. No. She gets approached by Ephraim. I was right. Nice. Ephraim T. Horn. He is a gray, so we get our first gray perspective, which I enjoyed. He is notably the ex-husband of Tig Nakamura, who is one of the two grays that rescued Darrow from the Jackal when he was locked in that table for a year, and then he was said to be like tortured and executed. The two grays came in, rescued him, and Tig died. Sorry, Windows is the worst. Interrupted my cool video. So, Tig died rescuing Darrow. He was killed by Aja Grimace. And super sad. So Ephraim was his husband, another gray, ex-security personnel. He was like an investigator for insurance companies. And then he joined the Rising, and he fought with the Legions with Holiday, who was Tig's brother, Holiday T. Nakamura. And then when Tig died, when Trig died, he got disillusioned and he quit. He became like a professional thief contractor. So he leads a crew of multiple colors that steal very expensive artifacts and relics and treasure. Super fun chapters. Noticeably, he steals the sword of Selenius, who was the original Lightbringer, the original gold that led the reign on Earth and formed the entire society. So this really old sword. So his first chapters are these series of heists, infiltrating, running jobs. Then we find out that the sword that was actually a test job by the mafia, by the mob. So the mob hired him to run this job so they could then blackmail him, like, oh, you stole from us. And he's like, oh crap, I'm gonna die. And it was really just like kind of a test audition to see if he'd give up the names of his employers. He didn't, because he's like a stand-up dude. A little bit of a drug problem. He has a lot of feelings. He takes Zolidone to like buzz out, and he's just basically been drinking and pill popping his way through his grief. Not healthy, not good. So they say, oh, the mob say, you gotta work for us now. We have one more job for you. That job is to kidnap two kids. One being Pax, Darrow's son. The other being this little monster, Several and Victra's daughter, Electra. She's an absolute demon, and I love her. She's great. So, they do this job to kidnap these two kids and hold them hostage. We'll give them to the mob. So, he does that by befriending Lyria. So he has a personality, a persona. He befriends her over all these chapters. Gets her like, oh, here's this pendant that was like my husband's, and he gave it to me, and I'll give it to you because we're friends. That pendant has a drone. The drone has like a little EMP. It knocks Cavix's ship out of the sky. They use a grav well to pull it into like an old hospital, close the roof, and they've gassed the ship and still the two kids. So he has a little bit of like mercy guilt. He leaves Lyria alive. He was supposed to like kill everyone that knew his identity. And he doesn't. Ephraim leaves her alive because he actually did care for her and kind of, she reminded him of Trig. It's this whole thing. So she immediately turns herself in. Even though she was kind of an accomplice, she does the right thing. And she's like, oh my goodness, I didn't know part of this. So she's like running through the streets, being chased by the mob, turns herself in, gets interrogated, like tortured just a little bit. And she tells everything. So that leads Holiday to Ephraim, and they're like, hey, took kids, that was wrong. He's like, I know, but it was the mob, and I didn't have any choice. And they're like, here's the choice, get them back. So he goes back to the mob hideout, walks in, takes the head mob dude, like, roughs him up. Anyway, is super cool guy, roughs up the guy, does a one-man solo operation. Get down from there. Does a one-man solo operation and rescues the 2 kids. And he does it, and he's super beat up. He gets like sniper shot, and he does like a one-man operation through this mob safe house with the 2 kids, which again, they're the kids of warlords, and they're golds, so they are, quit doing that, very terrifying. So just chill out. Okay, so they do like kill people, like do first aid, and they are they're not dead weight, they are very helpful. So they do that, and then they are flying out in their ship. They stole a ship. They're making their getaway, and the head boss. So this was like House of Cards. They have like 4 like dukes, and then they have like a king, right? And so this is one of the dukes, the Duke of Hands, that stole the kids. They rescued the kids from. The head of the old operation like remotes into their ship and is like, hey, you can't steal from me, we steal from you. And she remote pilots the ship to turn it around back to the mob, because they were like several hours away from any support. So Ephraim takes a bunch of grenades and he blows up the engines, so the ship doesn't like go back home to the mob, and they don't get like brutally tortured. So he's like, I'm gonna crash the ship instead, and they do, and that's where their chapter ends. You'll notice a theme. This book is really a lot of setup, and it really is a part 1 of a giant book, a giant 4-book series. So that's my only kind of complaint about this. The feedback is there is a lot of cliffhangers, a lot of people in the losses, and you kind of see that with Lysander. It ends. They do have endings. They do end arcs, but it really is doing setup for Dark Age. So this is where their story ends. Is Ephraim and the 2 kids like spiraling out and crashing the ship. So that's his story. The other, so yeah, Ephraim, Lyria. Who are other viewpoint chapters? Lysander and Darrow. So Darrow had broke the Minotaur out of captivity, and they went to Venus. They launched an assault on the Ash Lord's headquarters. The Ash Lord, who we see is probably the ones that hired the mob to kidnap Darrow's son, has been subverting Mustang, which is not her actual name, Virginia, who's subverting Virginia in the Senate, trying to overthrow her, trying to get her thrown out of sovereign. There's been a lot of manipulations. They said, hey, we're going to have peace talks. That was one of the things that Darrow kept under wraps, was like, they came to him saying, let's have peace. He's like, you're a liar. You're never going to have peace. I don't trust you. And so that went to the Senate, and they're like, oh my goodness, we could have had peace, and all these people are going to be dead. And so secretly, that's why Darrow's like, I'm going to cut the head off the dragon. No, not dragon, but the Grimace. I'm going to take out the Ash Lord, then everything will fall apart. He's been leading. He's my greatest foe. And he gets to Venus, storms the Ash Lord's headquarters with the Minotaur and Severo, takes a lot of hits, and they get to the chambers of the Ash Lord, and he's like in a sickbed. He's dying. He's been like... we find out that the Minotaur, Adelonius... Am I saying that right? He poisoned the Ash Lord like 2 years ago, because the Ash Lord betrayed Adelonius because he was so... Apollonius. Yeah, Apollonius. He betrayed him because he was so popular and so well-liked and so beloved, and he had all these legions. So he betrayed him, got him arrested, thrown in prison, and then he basically took his entire army. And so Apollonius is back, and he was like ruling this prison Al Capone style, which is kind of cool. But from prison, he got the Ash Lord poisoned, and the Ash Lord's been in the sickbed, and we found out he could have been running the show the whole time. And so Apollonius lights him on fire, and Severo. They kill him, crucially. They turn the Ash Lord to ash, and it's kind of a hollow victory, because they find out that the entire fleet is going to Mercury, where Darrow's army is resting. Half the fleet was recalled by the Republic, and so now they're going to be trapped. They have half a fleet. All the Ash Lord's fleet is going to surprise them, and they killed the Ash Lord, but he wasn't running anything anyway, and he was already dying. We kind of figure out and get hinted that his daughter, Atalantia, has been running the whole show for the last 2 years secretly, using like deep fake video technology and the Ash Lord and all these calls. She's actually been the new strategic genius and has been giving Darrow such a hard time. So she's still out there. Darrow's stranded on like an enemy planet. He finds out that his son has been kidnapped. So Several's like, peace, I gotta get out of here. I'm gonna go rescue our kids. I should never come here with you. So you have a lot of betrayal and heartache, and not betrayal, like family comes first, I get it. So, but Darrow's like, no, I gotta protect my fleet, my other family. They don't know this is coming. So that's where the book ends. Darrow steers a shuttle. He takes like a couple of the Howlers and the rest of their forces, which is like one ship's worth of people, to Venus to save his army and the what's left of his fleet. And Several disappears with the rest of the Howlers to try to save their kids. Their kids are in a falling, crash, exploded ship on Luna, being chased and surrounded by the Mafia. Ephraim's on that ship. Lyria has just turned herself in and is kind of in custody still. And we don't get a big resolution with her. And Lysander is also en route to Mercury to meet with the Grimace and the rest of the Society remnants to form an alliance with the Rim. Cassius is dead. Mustang is trying to hold the Senate against the mob and being overthrown, and she can't let people know that her kids were kidnapped because they have leverage against her, and she'll get impeached. And that is a summary. I didn't mean for this to be so long, but this is a summary of Iron Gold. Really looking forward. I have started Dark Age again, and I'll try to do a summary of that if I can knock that out quickly. I hope that was helpful.
Save Bandit!